Morning, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday morning Mind the Moment gathering brought to you by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Tufts Health Plan. We're very happy to be here with both Tara Healey and our special guest, Dr. Amishi Jha. So as a way of introduction, Dr. Amishi Jha is a best-selling author of the book Peak Mind. And in her day job, she's the director of contemplative neuroscience and a professor of psychology at the University of Miami. Her work has been covered by the New York Times, Time Magazine, Forbes, Mindful Magazine, NPR, and in podcast interviews with Brene Brown, Dan Harris, Sharon Salzberg, and many others. So we're so delighted to have you here this morning, Amishi. I think you'll just bring such a wonderful light into a different way to look at meditation and how we all think about it and engage with it. So happy to have you here.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So tell us how, we're also curious how you personally became interested in this practice and how you decided to study attention.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, it's great to be here, and always a delight to see both of you and to really benefit from the offerings that this organization has for the broader community. So, welcome to everybody. Thanks for tuning in. When it comes to my background, I would say I never thought I would be here. I
Mhm.
mean, just to say, I grew up thinking that I was going to be a medical doctor. And everything I did, even through high school, was kind of geared around that. I would volunteer at a hospital, shadow different physicians, and unfortunately, what I realized pretty soon, and in those days we were called candy stripers, and we'd be assigned to different floors of the hospital to go and do whatever we could to engage with patients that would be helpful to the staff. Um, I realized, unfortunately for me, that I was not cut out for this. This was not going to be an environment in which I was probably going to be my best self, or nor did I think I was going to be able to, frankly, see success in my career if I pursued this, because I just didn't. It wasn't my thing to be in the hospital environment. I love that people do that. Thank goodness that there are physicians and nursing staff and healthcare providers that do. But I've really lucked out, because even though I was starting to get that sense that this is probably not the career for me, one of the candy striping posts I had was in a brain injury unit. And I had the task of essentially engaging and socializing with patients. But there's one patient in particular that really kind of changed the course of my life in some sense. This was somebody who I thought was a quadriplegic. He had been a patient that had been in a motorcycle accident. And my job was to essentially take him outside when the weather warmed up in Chicago to give him some fresh air. And I knew he had been in there for many, many months as a recovery. But one day, he all of a sudden ended up, instead of this very elaborate wheelchair that I would have to, the nursing staff would have to help me push outdoors, he was in a different kind of chair, and he was kind of moving it himself with the tip of his finger. This lever he was moving himself. And I was kind of stunned. Like, first of all, I didn't know that he was even not a quadriplegic, but actually was able to regain function. And what he told me was that he was, of course, getting therapy, physical therapy, and other kinds of therapy all day long. But at night, when he was falling asleep, he would close his eyes and visualize himself moving his finger, sort of as he was pushing his wheelchair. And he thought that was really helpful to him to actually be able to do it. And I thought, man, this is so fascinating. He is changing the nature of his own brain by training his brain. And it hooked me. I decided that I don't really want to be a medical doctor, but I am definitely studying the brain. So, kind of fast forward to my undergraduate career, I was very fortunate to be able to be a neuroscience undergrad, which was rare. It was actually one of the first times that the University of Michigan even offered that. And then when I started graduate school, decided if I'm so interested in changing the brain, maybe one thing I could do is study a system that was going to have an impact on the entirety of the brain. And that was the brain's attention system. So attention, I knew at that moment, as I was learning about it, is such a powerful system. It literally is the brain's boss. Every single thing that the brain does is informed by what we pay attention to.
Mm.
And, there's a lot of room for change and improvement in this system, including its slow developmental time course. It doesn't fully develop till we're about 25 years old. Um, so anyway, the reason I think that this is such a strange sort of circumstances to be in here, to have this wonderful opportunity to talk to you all, is because I never thought I would go from attention to mindfulness. But
Mhm.
just to touch on a brief set of personal circumstances, at some point in my research life, when I had my own lab, we were trying to see what we could do to this very powerful system to make it fail. How do we actually mess it up? And we came up with a whole bunch of stuff that would consistently mess it up in these contrived situations in the lab. Things like negative stimuli that we'd present, or stress people out. Tell them to go faster, tell them they're messing up, or threaten them that you're going to be evaluated. And when we did that, yes, on cue, attention failed. So it, it became clear to me that this boss will sometimes, brain's boss, attention, will sometimes fail us. And the very circumstances in which it fails us are the ones where we probably need it the most. So I started becoming curious to go on the hunt for something that might protect attention. And that's how mindfulness entered my lab's work. It was out of all the things that we tested out, the only thing that reliably and consistently and robustly protected and strengthened attention, which is how it changed the kind of course of my life and career.
And Amishi, it's interesting because a lot of people are doing sort of brain games, different kinds of um, games to help improve. So, what does the research say about those in terms of strengthening attention versus mindfulness?
Such a good question. And that was one of the things that we tried in my lab as well, is let's have, there's a whole industry around
Right.
brain games to train
Yeah.
the brain. And I will say that if somebody is truly compromised, like they've had a stroke or have some kind of debilitating neurological disorder, those games can be very helpful to regain some specific functions that are
Mhm.
tied to what the game is training. But for
Yeah.
most folks, they will be able to engage in the game and they will get better at the game. Um, and then not much else. So it's a problem of what we call far transfer. You can transfer near to what you train, but the brain is so efficient that it'll pretty much just get better at doing the thing. And now, for example, if I'm trying to train my attention and I now say, okay, how do I apply this to my actual life? Go from playing this simple game to now I want to be able to write an email with more focus. I want to read a book without being distracted. I want to have a conversation without
Yeah.
going off very many directions. It does not seem to transfer over to those aspects. Whereas mindfulness does. And that's what was key, is that the training with mindfulness relative to brain games, uh, even certain kinds of technological solutions like light and sound devices, mindfulness was able to integrate and sort of penetrate real world transfer for people. So they
Yeah.
did feel they could focus better in their lives.
Amisha, I want to say that you wrote this book, Peak Mind, which is such a wonderful book. And along these lines, what we're talking about, what is a peak mind and how can we strengthen it?
Yes, thanks for mentioning the book. The book essentially is the culmination of all this work, of over 2 decades of work, where we were coming to solutions, interrogating very carefully and really with a high bar for research standards, and finding solutions. And I was just wanting to make sure that that information was accessible to the world, because most of our work was with very specific groups: military service members, first responders, medical and nursing professionals. To me, a peak mind is what those professionals and many other professionals need, which is not so much about, when you hear that term, you might think peak, I'm at the top of the mountain. I'm like, I've done it all. I'm the most successful I'll ever be, which is wonderful. But that's not really what I was referring to. I was referring to a mind that has full access to all of its capacities, so that this diminishment we were seeing with attention because of stress or threat or negative mood wouldn't occur.
Mm.
And with that mind, it doesn't really matter if you're at the peak of a mountaintop or in the middle of a very difficult situation on terra firma, so to speak, and you will have the best capability to meet the moment as it is. And that sometimes means that it may not be your best performance, but it may be the best performance you can offer under those circumstances. With so many different communities, we see this. I recently had the opportunity to talk to folks in Ukraine, sort of frontline psychological
Oh,
health providers for the Ukrainian military. And it's the same idea. It's that in this circumstance, things are extremely difficult. We're
yeah.
scared. We have an existential threat upon us. How can we behave in a way that best supports our ability to be in this moment? So we're not
Mm,
further disadvantaging ourselves because we've lost our attentional capacity. We can't regulate our mood. We are being reactive and we're disconnected from each other. So that's
mhm.
that. A peak mind is a mind that's the opposite of that, that's fully
That,
resourced to meet the
mm,
challenge. But the flashlight is essentially what we might call focus. And in brain science terms, it's formally called the brain's orienting system. And I talk about it with this metaphor of a flashlight because its job, just like an actual flashlight, is to highlight or illuminate certain information, but everything else around it, that's not where you're directing your flashlight, is darkened and disadvantaged. And why do we want this? Well, there are sometimes we definitely want to highlight what's relevant and disregard what's irrelevant, or else we're really prone to distractibility. So in the brain, it actually is the case that when we direct our attention to something, it does seem brighter, more salient, more alive. And just like an actual flashlight, we can hold that control and we can direct it willfully. We can direct it to the external environment, but we can actually direct it internally as well. And you were mentioning memory, right? Somebody introduces you to a new person and you don't remember their name. What happened in that moment? Well, that wasn't actually a memory failure. That was a flashlight failure. Because if you weren't paying attention to the name being said in that moment, you aren't going to highlight it so that it can then get encoded and remembered. So we
mm.
use it for the external environment and our internal environment. But one other thing to say about the flashlight, and then I'd love to have you guide us.
Sure, yeah.
It can get yanked. So not only do we direct a flashlight, but imagine you're in a darkened room or a darkened path and you hear a strange sound. You're going to point that flashlight wherever it is that you hear the strange sound come from. And what does it go toward? Novel, strange, potentially dangerous, self-related. These are all the kind of qualities of what will grab our attention, which can end up being a source of distractibility if we want to be pointing it to something else.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Amishi. So with that, let's go ahead and settle into a posture where the spine is straight but not stiff. So you're holding yourself in a way that's upright and engaged and allowing your weight to surrender into the support of the surface that you're on and of the earth below. And taking a moment to just notice any physical sensations being offered in the body. So it could be pulsing or vibration, temperature. And expanding outward a bit to include sound in the room or outside of the room. And allowing sound to remain in the background as it will, beginning to bring awareness back inward to the whole body. And let's go ahead and aim that flashlight now. We're going to narrow the focus of attention on breath sensation. So really highlighting with the flashlight the sensations you feel when you inhale and when you exhale, wherever in the body it's most noticeable to you. So it could be the abdomen, chest, nostrils, or something else. So we're just narrowing the focus of attention. And as you inhale and exhale, tracking the sensations of the breath in and breath out. And thoughts will naturally slip in unnoticed, and there'll be a point where you notice. And as soon as you notice, soft mental note thinking, soften the body, and bring that flashlight back to the sensations. The same with sound or another body sensation. Allow your attention to go to that for a moment, acknowledge it, and then escort the attention back to breath sensation. And noticing where the mind is. And just bringing that flashlight back to breath sensation. And counting back 3, 2, and 1. And if your eyes were closed, you can open the eyes. And again, take a moment to just reorient to the room that you're in, to the space that you're in. And we can see if there are any questions. Suzanne, any questions in the chat?
Why does the act of forced focusing with a flashlight work to our benefit?
I think this goes back actually to what we were talking about before with the juggler. So the juggler is actually a different system that's about our goals. And it's ensuring that our goals and our action are aligned. The forced aspect is essentially saying, let's have a goal in mind. And we always have a goal in mind, whether it's a goal that we thought we had or some other kind of goal. Like, for example, if there's delicious food, we might always have a baseline goal of like, I want that food. Forced focus, essentially, I don't know what you mean by that exactly, but one aspect of it is to ensure that what we are doing and what we choose to do based on our goals aligns. And that can be helpful because it's tuning us up to make sure that our actions and our wishes align. But knowing that and keeping it at the front of the mind allows us to train the mind to get back on track with what we want to be doing during the practice.
I wonder too, Amishi, it's almost like kind of weightlifting for the brain in a way. You're bringing back doing reps against, instead of a weight, the thoughts. If it helps to create some like stabilization or calibration so that mindfulness can work more effectively.
Yeah, and it's also a wonderful backdrop against the mind wandering away.
Right.
Because if there is a goal and the goal is to stay focused, you are aware, when you become aware at some point that that's not where the mind is. And then the whole terrain of what the mind wanders to, its frequency, and then what we do with the mental content as it arises is its own sort of growth journey. Though the explicit instruction has come back when you notice the mind wandering, there may be aspects where we notice, I keep going back to that thought. Sort of like a sore you might have in your mouth and your tongue keeps going back to that spot. It's like, oh, what is that? And then even after the fact, even after the practice is over, it might help provide some insight into aspects of your life that you may need to take a deeper look at outside of practice. So there's many benefits to having a target object during the practice, I think, that can be beneficial.
Someone's mentioned that they were curious if mindfulness is used to treat attention deficit disorders.
Yes, absolutely it is.
Hmm.
The way it's offered to children and adults is not going to be the same way it's offered to folks that don't have attention deficit disorder. But these same features of focusing, noticing, redirecting, and then repeating tend to be aspects of attention that can be strengthened in folks with ADD. What we know from the literature on attention deficit disorder and mindfulness is that it's definitely beneficial, but you've got to go slowly, make the practices more active, ramp up with more care. So, for example, though even the subtitle of my book talks about 12 minutes a day, we wouldn't start off with 12 minutes a day with a child or with the child with ADD or even adult with ADD. We'd probably start with walking meditation instead of eyes closed, and then we'd slowly quiet through the series of activities and build the time. In one of the projects we did, we weren't doing 12 minutes a day till the end of the 8th week of the training. So it is
Makes
beneficial, but the method is slightly different than it would be for those that aren't.
Yeah, that
And
makes
one more
sense.
question I want to slide in. Do you have any tips for disconnecting from social media in a realistic way? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, the practice would be treating your engagement with social media, even your phone, I would say, as a mindfulness activity. And while most of what we experience is mindless, we are in the app already scrolling and, for 10 minutes before we wake up. Instead, we want to treat the moment we pick up the phone, the moment we click on the button for the particular app, our engagement with it, have the goal in mind of why you're on. Once that goal is achieved, disengage. You can go back if you choose to, but treat it in the same way you would a mindfulness practice. There is a focus. I'm noticing where my mind is. I'm keeping in mind the goal, and I'm redirecting back, and I'm setting limits on what I do. And the other aspect of this is we need to force social media companies to help us do this. So for example, having to go to another screen is a break point that makes us wake up to like, do I want to keep doing this? Or asking us, you've been on for X number of minutes, do you want to continue? So it's both our brains being able to be better trained, but it's also advantaging our brain because it's frankly doing exactly as it should be when it's engaging with this kind of mental content. It's getting sucked in.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps a little
They
bit.
wanted us to do, right?
Yeah, that is so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are the product. Our attention is the product. And
Yeah.
we've got to know that that's the relationship we're in with a lot of this technology.
Yeah.
www.point32health.org/peak mind. You can get any of the information and the recording. So thanks again, Amishi. Thank you to Tara.
Thank you.
And see you all soon. Have a good rest of your day.